Okay, so Women Business 2020, October 17th, day 3. It's 3 days of learning, growing, and empowerment. Okay. What is Women Business Chicago? It is a free and virtual conference for female and non-binary high school and college students who are passionate about STEM and business. Hear from inspiring and successful women about their careers and leave feeling empowered to pursue your passions in business and tech.
And kind of the reason why we started Women in Business Chicago is by the motto, inspire, empower, and repeat. We know that women only make up 28% of the STEM field, and women also make up less than 5% of top executives at companies. And we also know that these numbers are even lower for women of color who face additional barriers to accessing opportunities.
The team. So I'm Sydney Hollibow. I am the co-founder and co-director of Women Business
And hi, everyone. I'm Jordana. I'm also the co-founder and co-director of Women in Business.
Okay, and today's schedule, at 2:10, we have The Art of a Startup with Nora Lieben via Zoom. This is all via Zoom. Tech and Law at 3:10, and at 4:10, we have a panel with college students who majored in STEM and business. Okay, giveaway reminders. The more sessions you attend and ask questions during, you will receive more entries into our raffle for a $50 gift card, and we will announce this tomorrow, and we will email you if you win. Based on your live session attendance, you will also be placed in a priority list to get exclusive budgeting content from Money Girls.
Yeah, and this is just a little bit more about Money Girls. So Money Girls connects the rising generation of smart, motivated women with the knowledge, tools, and network they need to confidently and capably run their own money. And they're on a mission to empower every woman to maximize her influence and independence by taking control of her financial life. And we'll be letting you know if you've been placed on that list within the next week. And Money Girls actually created exclusive content just for attendees of the conference. So once they have created that content, we'll send that over to whoever's been selected.
Okay, and text WMB SHY to 81010 to receive text reminders and updates about sessions. And since it's the last day, today is the last day to use that number if you want to find out updates. Yeah, so we're actually going to get started. I'd like to pass it over to Shannon. She's going to introduce herself, tell everyone about herself, and feel free to drop questions in the Q&A, and she will answer them at the end.
Yeah, and before we let Shannon get started, I just want to say thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate your willingness to be here on a Saturday for our final day of Women in Business. And also thank you so much to Shannon for agreeing to speak today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to speak to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will share my screen.
Let me make sure. Here.
Okay, can you guys see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so hi guys, my name is Shannon Feng, and I'm here to talk today about a little bit who I am, what my role is in STEM and tech, and how I ended up in a tech career. And I also will talk about some of the challenges and the doubts that I had along the way, and some things that I've done to help overcome those kinds of challenges. And before I get started, I just want to thank you guys again for taking time out of a Saturday to hear me speak. Thank you for all the organizers for this event, and especially Jordana for inviting me and willing to call me in, this week. So I'm really excited to talk about who I am today. So a little bit of background. I grew up in Wisconsin for most of my life, and I attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And at Madison, I double majored in computer science and math, and I graduated somewhat recently in May 2019. And then shortly after I graduated, I started working full-time at Amazon as a software engineer, and that's in Seattle, Washington. And that was beginning in August 2019. And I've worked on 2 different teams so far at Amazon, but the team I work on currently is in the Alexa Proactive organization. And this team that I work on in Alexa manages the software that helps Alexa to make recommendations or suggestions to customers. So for example, if you were talking to an Alexa device, like something like this Echo Dot that I have in the picture, and you said, "Hey Alexa, what's the weather?" Well, Alexa, it will answer your question and she'll say something like, "It's sunny outside, it's 70 degrees." And then she might follow up with some sort of recommendation, such as, "By the way, your package was delivered at 10 a.m. today." So that's an example of the kind of content that my team helps to inject into your conversation using our software. So that's a little bit about where I am today, but what I mainly want to focus on is how did I end up in tech in the first place? What led me to pursue a career in technology? And in answering that question, there's a lot of factors that came to my mind, but I want to break it down and focus on three of the, I think, the most important factors that influenced my decision to pursue tech. And so I'll talk about each of these in more detail, but here they are. The first one is early inspiration that I had and experiences in my childhood that I think formed my initial love and interest in technology. The second big one for me is having a really awesome people in my life, a great support system, people who were willing to support me along the way, help me make decisions and decide what I ultimately wanted to do. And the last is having some really great work experiences prior to working full-time. These experiences came from internships and part-time work where I had the chance to meet people in the workplace that supported my goals and helped me to believe in my abilities. So first I'll talk about the early inspirations. What do I mean by that? Well, when I think about myself as a kid, I really enjoyed building stuff. I loved to put things together, to problem solve, to create something. And I was especially a big fan of Legos. So I actually found this photo when putting together this presentation. And this is a picture of me and my brother. I think it was probably Christmas time, Christmas morning, around 2001. And I have some sort of Lego toy in my hand. I actually don't really know what I'm holding there, but I thought it was kind of funny and I wanted to include it. But when I was younger, I also really looked up to my older brother, and we would play Legos together, but we would also play computer games, and my parents had a Windows PC in our house. And I think part of having the influence of my older brother in my life was that I discovered, hey, this technology stuff is pretty cool. Besides computer games, we'd also play Xbox 360. And I just had a lot of exposure to using a computer and technology from a pretty early age. And I think this had a huge influence on why I ended up in tech. So besides those earlier experiences, along the way, getting into high school and starting to take more tech-related classes, I think I had some really great people in my life at the time that were supporting me and helped me to decide what I wanted to do. And when I think about the mentors that I had along the way, who first comes to mind is actually my AP high school computer science teacher. And his name is Mr. Osterberg, but I always refer to him as Mr. O. And Mr. O was someone who is really aware of gender diversity or the lack of gender diversity in STEM. And he was the kind of person who is an ally to women in tech. So when I was in high school, he intentionally took steps to help women students like me find STEM opportunities outside of school. So for me personally, he actually encouraged me to apply for the scholarship award from a program called NC-WIT. And maybe a lot of you guys are already familiar with NC-WIT, but it stands for the National Center for Women and Information Technology. And it's really dedicated to helping high school and college age women pursue careers in computing or STEM. And if it wasn't for my teacher, Mr. O, to come by my desk one day in our class and he said, hey, you should apply for this NC-WIT thing, then I never would have applied in the first place. I don't think I even would have heard about NC-WIT. Did I get a question in the Q&A?
Yeah, we're gonna do that at the end.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so NC-WIT, I would not have heard about that if it weren't for Mr. O to come by my desk and say, apply for this thing. So I applied. I didn't really think I would win any scholarship, but I applied anyways. And a few months later, to my surprise, I actually ended up receiving one of the scholarships in the state of Wisconsin. And to me, this was a really pleasant surprise because at first, I didn't think I really had a chance at winning anything. And receiving this award from NC-WIT was just one experience that helped me to believe in my abilities to be in a technical career. And it made me think more about majoring in computer science in college. And then another part of the support that I've had is I think about the people I met in the workplace prior to working full time. My previous managers and coworkers, who many of which were male coworkers, these were people who were still supporting me in my goals and they believed in me, which leads me to my next point about the workplace experiences that I've had. So during college, I worked part-time for a manufacturing company in Milwaukee called Rockwell Automation. And so if you ever visit Milwaukee and you see this cool looking clock tower, that's actually part of the Rockwell Automation headquarters. So one reason why I applied to Rockwell in the first place was because of someone, Mr. O actually sent out an email to the computer science class. And he was like, hey, this company is hiring high school and college and people going into college. So if that's you, if you're a high school senior or you're going to be a college, I guess high school seniors are going to be college freshmen. But Rockwell is hiring pretty high schoolers. So I applied for this program and I was accepted to this internship. It was started in the summer after my senior year. But at Rockwell, their program was a rotational engineering program. So I got to try out different types of engineering roles in the company to see what I liked. And one thing I noticed when I was working at Rockwell was that there's women in every type of engineering role at least that what I saw in the company, from mechanical engineering to chemical, industrial, software, firmware. I was able to see firsthand that there's a significant number of women in STEM roles in the workplace. Now, when I was at Rockwell, the ratio of men to women was still unbalanced. Maybe it was about 30% women. But I think seeing other women in these engineering roles helped me to affirm my interests in tech and engineering. And at Rockwell, I started, once my internship had ended, it started in the summer, I continued working not full-time, part-time at Rockwell throughout college. And I had a really supportive manager at Rockwell who was constantly encouraging me to learn new technologies. So it was at Rockwell that I learned to build my first web application, which at the time I thought that was just the coolest thing ever because seeing my code come to life and see it up on an actual website was just really cool to me. It still is super cool to me that I have the skills to build web apps. So that's part of what I did at Rockwell. In summer 2018, I started interning at Amazon as a software engineer intern. And during that summer internship, I met a lot of other women interns and full-time employees at Amazon. And overall, the experience I had at Amazon was really positive because I think the management in my organization and the people on my team were very aware of gender divides, gender diversity, and inclusivity in the workplace. I think Amazon does a really great job of making sure their workplace is diverse. But I felt like my team that I was interning with wanted to see me succeed and eventually land a full-time offer at the end of my internship. So when I look back at these experiences that I had at Rockwell and Amazon, I think the people that I met at these companies really helped me to believe in my abilities and decide that software engineering is right for me. So far I've talked about some really great experiences I've had in my journey to tech, but I haven't really touched on the difficulties or the challenges that I've had in the past and that I actually still have to this day. So when I think about challenges and doubts, I think the number one is this thing called imposter syndrome. And maybe a lot of you guys have heard about this, But imposter syndrome is essentially when you have a constant doubt in your skills and abilities, and you think maybe you're a fraud, maybe you really don't have the abilities to do your work. So constantly I had this thought, am I cut out for this? So as early as working at Rockwell Automation, I felt like I wasn't truly an engineer. A lot of the time when you're learning to write code or learning a new skill, you look stuff up on the internet and you literally Google your questions and look on websites like stackoverflow.com to figure out how stuff works. You watch YouTube videos and you just kind of use what the resources you have. But when I was first starting out writing code, I thought I was kind of cheating. Like, as an engineer, shouldn't I know a lot of the stuff off the top of my head? Shouldn't I know like all these code frameworks and libraries? And I didn't really think I was truly an engineer. I thought I was being pretty fake. And plus, when I got to Amazon as a summer intern, I began meeting other interns from all over the country. And many of them came from these super prestigious colleges. And sometimes I felt like I wasn't as smart as the other people around me. I wasn't as strong enough as an engineer to make it at Amazon. And I felt like I needed to be this brilliant problem solver from like an Ivy League college. And if I wasn't, then I don't really have the skills to be it at Amazon. The second biggest doubt I've had is related to being a woman in tech. Because companies like Rockwell and Amazon, they really care about gender diversity, racial diversity. But sometimes I felt like, did they only hire me because they wanted to hire more women? Were they trying to increase their numbers, make themselves as a company look better? So were they just looking for women to hire? And when I got hired at Amazon as a summer intern, I even suggested to one of my male friends that I was only hired because I was a woman. And when I look back on that conversation and that experience, I wish I never said anything like that, because now I believe that Amazon hired me and they hire people based on your abilities. But the conversation that I had with my male friend, I think, reflects the doubts I was having at the time about being a woman in tech. And finally, I often felt like I was out of place at a lot of the places I worked. So for example, there's been many times where I'll go out to lunch with some coworkers, and then suddenly I realize I'm the only woman in the group. And it's not that my male coworkers are unsupportive, but it can be a strange feeling to realize that you're the only one of a kind in a group of people. And this at times can feel isolating. You can feel isolated, like you're the odd one out. So if you've ever experienced the doubts that I just mentioned, or you can relate to something I said, what can you do about it? Well, with all of these challenges that I just talked about, the truth is I haven't figured out a one-size solution, like a one-size-fits-all solution to completely overcome these doubts. But what I do try to keep in mind is that many, many people have felt the exact same way as I have, and that I am not alone in feeling how I did. So for imposter syndrome, for example, if you ever experience doubts about your abilities or you feel like you're fake, I like to keep in mind that imposter syndrome is it's a very real phenomenon. And many men and women both experience imposter syndrome. But I think it's especially common for women and women of color in STEM careers to experience it. And I think it doesn't help that if you're a woman in STEM or business and you don't see as many people like you don't see people who you could look up to, maybe you don't have many role models in the workplace, this can compound the feelings of imposter syndrome. But what I have to say to that is, if you do feel like you're an imposter, just first know that you are not an imposter, and that remember, you're not alone in feeling that way. And then for the second doubt I mentioned about, did I get this job just because I'm a woman? For that, I like to remind myself of the things I've done leading up to where I am today. So whenever I think I don't have the skills for a job, I also think about, well, what have I accomplished so far in my life? I think about my previous experiences to remind myself that yes, I do have the abilities, and I'm not hired just because I'm a woman or I look a certain way. So if you ever think you were accepted to a job or a college program or a scholarship just because of some component of your identity, that's probably false. You were accepted or hired because of the abilities that you have today and the potential for you to bring value to wherever you go. So I like to remember that even if you didn't have the skills for some job, something you're applying to, just remember that you still have the potential to learn new skills. And finally, for that last point I made about feeling out of place, feeling like you're the only one or the only type of person in a certain group setting, I realized that often being the only one is a problem that you can't immediately fix in the moment. Maybe you're just stuck in that situation for a while and you're going to continue being the only woman in a group or person of a certain identity. But if you ever find yourself in that type of situation where you're the only kind of person, remember that you can be the role model for somebody else later down the road. So you might be the only woman or the only person of a certain racial makeup represented in a group of people. And for the time being, you might be alone in your role. But in the future, you could inspire someone else who comes along. Maybe they have a similar background and interest as you, and you can share your story and be the role model for that person. It just might be a number of months or even years before that ever happens. But remember that you can be the role model. So, takeaways. What do I have to say about for anyone pursuing or thinking about majoring in a STEM or business major or pursuing that kind of career? Well, I think the first thing I would say is to know who you are and what you enjoy doing. So for me, I knew from an early age that I love to build stuff and create things. And I loved using a computer and technology. And that naturally lent itself to software engineering. So I would encourage you to think about your past experiences and the things that you enjoy to see how can you incorporate those things into a future career. And the second point I want to make is to apply for stuff and don't be shy or afraid to do so. So for me, I never thought I would win the NC WIT scholarship. I never thought Rockwell Automation would accept my application as a high schooler. And I definitely didn't think Amazon would ever get back to me or even read my resume when I applied to be an intern. But if I didn't, I had people, I was fortunate that I had a support system. I had people like my high school teacher or my coworkers who believed in me, and they encouraged me to try these things, even if I thought I wouldn't get the position or get the job. And I don't think I would have ever applied to any of those things if it weren't for those supportive people in my life. So with this point about not being afraid to apply for stuff, I would also say, if you can find a mentor, like a teacher or another student or a professional, someone who's maybe a few years ahead of you in life, I would strongly encourage you to find a mentor, someone you can go to for advice. Because having a mentor can help you pursue your goals and take that last step that you need to apply for something, even if you have doubts that maybe you doubt that you think you won't get it, or maybe you're underqualified. I would say apply anyways, because you'd be surprised who is on the other side reading your resume, reviewing your application, and you'd be surprised who might get back to you. And then lastly, I want to put in this quote that I like to keep in mind, which is, "There is nothing new under the sun." So I like this because it reminds me that whatever I have experienced, whether it's my doubts or feeling alone, someone else out there in history, maybe even like recent history, like a month before, has experienced the exact same thing. And I keep this quote in mind because it's a reminder to me that I am not the only one. So that was all I kind of had, but I mainly want to open it up to questions because I want this to also be a great discussion and not just me talking to you guys. So please do let me know any questions you have.
And thank you so much for the lovely presentation. Again, NCWIT, please apply. It closes November 5th. So if anyone's interested, like, please apply. We'll drop the link in the chat later. And also, I just loved how you said, like, you didn't think you were going to get it, but you applied. And that inspires me because I actually just applied for the NCWIT because my older friend was like, apply, like, you never know.
Yes.
And I just want to like reiterate that, like, don't be afraid. Like, even though you think you're underqualified, you are not. There are so many other people in your position that go for it, and that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, my teacher came by my desk twice. I didn't mention that. He came by my desk twice. The first time he dropped the application on my desk, like a piece of paper. He's like, apply for this. And I'm like, all right. I looked at it and I'm like, I'm not going to do this. And he came by again a week before the deadline. And he said, did you apply for that NCWIT thing? And I was like, not yet. So I ended up applying the week of. And, but yeah, it took 2 pushes from my teacher to get me to apply. So definitely, if you're on the fence or if you haven't applied for NCWIT, I would encourage you to do so.
Yeah, I totally want to reiterate that. That's how I found Shannon.
Yes,
Wonderful little community.
that's right.
at
Yeah,
NCWIT.
that's right. At NCWIT, I'm part of the Facebook group, and that's how Jordana reached out to me. So you can build connections too.
And
Oh,
someone just asked, how much it does like NCWIT charge to apply? It's actually free, and the only thing you do need is a recommendation. I
From a
don't like
teacher,
it can be from any
or-
teacher. So it does not have to be a computer science teacher. And we can go to the Q&A now. So Ramona asked, how has your identity, not just being a woman, but also your national background and upbringing, affected your overall outlook, sorry, I just had like mouth surgery, on work ethic, goals, challenges, and so forth?
Yeah, how is my identity? So not just being a woman. Yes, I can definitely talk about this. So my racial identity, I am half white and half Chinese. And so my mom is Irish and Polish, and then my dad is Chinese. And sometimes being biracial has made me think, like I mentioned in a previous slide, that was I hired for this job just because I'm a woman? Well, the same is true about like racial identity. Like I check off the 2 or more races box on a job application. And sometimes I'm like, did this company like spend more time on my resume just because like they saw 2 or more races and maybe they want to increase like their statistics that are public facing and make themselves look better as a company? So my background in that sense has made me had more doubts. Being a woman is not just one part, it's just one part of my identity. And then my racial makeup is another component of that. How has it affected my outlook on work, goals, challenges? I guess it's, I'm proud to be who I am. I'm proud to be biracial and come from a multicultural family. For work ethic, it's interesting because so in the workplace, especially if you're going to end up in a tech role and end up at a place like Amazon in software engineering, I work with a huge range of people from different backgrounds and nationalities. And so I work with actually a lot of Chinese people, and I don't speak Mandarin. I don't speak any Chinese language. And so it's been kind of different in the workplace. Sometimes people look at me and they might assume that maybe I can speak Mandarin when I don't. And this can sometimes make me feel a little uncomfortable or feel like, am I letting someone down because they had certain expectations that I might speak this language that I don't. I only know English. That's my first language. So it's interesting, but if anything, I'm really proud to be who I am. And I am proud to be a woman in tech and also a multiracial woman.
Awesome. We have another question from Pam who asks, what is one thing that you wish men knew about the female experience in tech?
So when you're the only woman, like going out to lunch with male coworkers, it's kind of like, I'm like the only woman here. It's kind of weird. What do I wish men knew about that, or being a woman in tech? Um, Maybe it's like, I wish maybe they can be more aware that, like, when you're the only woman in a situation, it can be like, I hope men aren't like looking at me differently, or maybe I hope they're not underestimating my ability, um, because I am a woman and the only woman in this situation. I'm trying to think, what would I tell like my male friends about my experience?
And we can flip the question.
Yeah,
Like as a female community, what do you wish like other people saw? Like I know, like for me, I wish men accepted my ideas more, because sometimes I feel like I say something and then they feel like, oh, she's a girl, she's not as smart. And I've had experienced that, like not recently, but in middle school. Like I remember sophomore year, we were all working on a project and they're like, no, you're wrong. It's like, well, you didn't even hear my idea.
yeah, yeah. And I have a friend who I met at University of Wisconsin who majored in computer engineering, and she now she works at a company in Seattle, but she had told me about an experience she had. She went to an um, office hours to see one of her professors, and I think she went with some people in a team project she was on, and all her teammates were guys. And she noticed that the professor was only making eye contact and looking directly at all of the guys in the room, but not her. And I think when you're a woman in tech, or you're a woman in a male dominated situation, these subtle signs, these subtle body language signs can really leave a bad impression and kind of make you feel out of place. So I guess when I think back actually to this question that Pam asked, what do I wish men knew, I want them to be more aware, and aware of their body language, aware of how they're communicating, especially to women, like in a meeting or in a group setting.
Thank you. And then I see Katie asked, what attracted you to a company like Amazon? Why'd you choose a bigger company over smaller tech firms?
Yeah, well, I had always been drawn to huge companies. For some reason, like in college, I had it in my head that I'm like, I'm gonna end up at a big tech company, and maybe that became like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I was drawn to big companies like Amazon because, well, first off, Amazon is so broad, and I really liked that I would have so many opportunities. Like I mentioned, I've been on 2 different teams at Amazon so far, and I haven't even been at the company for a year and a half. So being able to experience 2 different products, my first team was in fulfillment technology, and that team was helping to manage inventory in the databases that held the inventory data in Amazon warehouses worldwide. And now my current team is in Alexa, which is a completely different product. It's more customer facing, more in the public eye. So that's what I liked about a big company like Amazon, is just being able to move around internally. I also like that people recognize the name of the company. Sometimes it just makes it easier with conversations like, I work for Amazon, and everybody knows what that is because they probably have ordered stuff off Amazon before. So that's part of the reason why I was drawn to big companies.
And then a follow-up question from me. I know you're working on with like Alexa and all. Like, what is something that you're rolling out in the next few months? Like, I'm just curious. Like, is there like something top secret or you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think I can share this. So I mentioned I work on a team that injects content, injects recommendations into a customer's conversation, and we do it proactively, anticipating the customer's needs. That's why the organization is called Alexa Proactive. We are working on, I guess it's kind of like a feature. It's part of our software that's running in the background, but we're working on something that will detect, using machine learning. It intelligently knows a customer's previous responses to Alexa. When we give a recommendation, if the customer answers Alexa kind of angrily or annoyed, or says, Alexa, shut up, well, we're training our system, we're gathering that past historical data to know when and when not to inject content for a certain customer. So we're trying to detect how the customer will react so that we can prevent Alexa from like making the wrong person mad. So it is a pretty cool project. It requires a lot of machine learning and big data processing. So you should expect, if you have an Amazon device that has Alexa, expect Alexa to be less annoying if Alexa has annoyed you with recommendations.
That's very exciting. Sydney and I both have Alexa products, so this will be
Nice.
very
My
exciting.
Alexa gives me a notification at 8 a.m. before I should wake up, and I'm like, wow, thank you. And I say a little passive aggressively, so maybe she'll learn.
Okay. Yeah, so that's an example of we're injecting content into your situation, into your conversation. So
Awesome.
yeah,
We
in fact, my Alexa device is over here, but I had to put it on mute
Yeah.
because if I say that word Alexa, she'll start talking. This happens
exactly.
like in work meetings. I have to remember to mute my device because whenever the word Alexa comes up, people's devices start talking in the background.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so funny. We have a question from Stacy. I know she asks, where did your earlier career choices lead you to where you are now? I know that you're obviously only a year out of college, but
Yeah.
if you could kind of talk about the like trajectory of where you've gone.
Yeah, earlier career choices. So Rockwell Automation was the first, I guess, like techish engineering company that I've been at. I did think about majoring in economics or business, something business related, before deciding on computer science. Um, I think the reasoning for why I ended up majoring in computer science was because I had more people who, the people I knew in my life, they had a big influence on me, and a lot of them were also going towards engineering stuff and coding, and I had people like my teacher, Mr. O, who really helped me find opportunities in computer science. Whereas something like economics, I really enjoyed AP microeconomics. It was one of my favorite classes, but I didn't have as many opportunities in economics. It's not like I had an economics internship or knew a lot of people who were also going to study that. So I think that could have had a big influence on me. But I know your question's asking more about career choices. Yeah, at Rockwell, like I said, I was able to see women in other types of engineering roles, like mechanical and chemical. But I had always been I liked coding the best. I liked my AP computer science class. And I didn't think like I would enjoy something like mechanical engineering as much or chemical. I didn't really like chemistry. So I think even just like the courses I was taking in school in high school, not even college, had a big influence um, on why I wanted to be in tech. And I thought software engineering was probably the best way to get into a tech career.
Perfect. Because the next question is, where do you see yourself career-wise in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, 5 to 10 years. So I know this is a Women Mean Business conference, and I have more of a technical background. But in 5 to 10 years, I've been thinking a lot about getting an MBA because I don't see myself coding forever. Probably in 10 years, I don't know if I'll be still writing code as a software engineer. I think I'd like to transition to a more management position, and I think getting an MBA could help me make that transition or even change industries. I don't know if I'll be in a tech company like Amazon for a long time. So yeah, I see myself probably having an MBA within 10 years if I decide to do that. Sometimes I'm back and forth between if an MBA is really necessary. And I'd like to start my own business someday. I think it'd be cool to be an entrepreneur. I haven't decided what I would actually make, but just the idea of starting a business. I think I've always been drawn to like online commerce, e-commerce. Like Amazon is an e-commerce company. I think being online and virtual is the way to go. I mean, this pandemic has taught us the importance of having services available online. Like Grubhub is pretty cool, and like you can order food through your phone and it's literally delivered to you 30 minutes later. Something related to e-commerce or digital services, digital products. I'd like to be in that space in 10 years.
Super cool. That actually sounds like a great plan. We have kind of a longer question from an anonymous attendee. They say, have you met resistance instead of support from other women in tech, and how did you deal with that? When I told my friend who's also a woman in tech about programs like Girls Who Code and Code with Glossy, she said that they were terrible for the industry, despite knowing that I got my start in CS through them.
Yeah, this is an interesting question because, so have I met resistance? Yes. And resistance instead of support from other women. Yeah, I actually have. And I'll give an example in a bit. And then the other part of this question, in saying that these programs are horrible for the industry. So I think it's great to see initiatives like NCWIT and like this conference is like, these are awesome initiatives that inspire women like me. I don't know if I would have ended up in tech if it wasn't for something like NCWIT. They inspired me and they gave me support and the resources to help me land a job in software engineering. So they're definitely not horrible for the industry, but with anything, I think it can be taken the wrong way. I think there's a lot of bashing on men and a lot of even hatred towards towards men in general. I think this is a larger societal problem. It's not just a technical thing. Like in all industries and business and related industries to tech, most of these companies are male dominated. And there's historical reasons for that. It's not just a technical issue. But with these programs like Girls Who Code or any of these things that are focused on helping women, I think we need to be careful to see men are not the enemy. Men who are in management positions, like all of my managers and I've ever had have been men. Those managers are the same people who were an ally to me, and they really helped me and they believed in my abilities. Of course, not all men are like that, but the majority of men I've worked with so far have been quite supportive. So with these programs, I don't think they're horrible for the industry, but we need to be careful who's running these programs and what are their opinions on men. That's a huge thing. And then the first part, have you met resistance instead of support? So yeah, actually I met someone in the workplace she was a woman and she was a senior engineer, which I thought was super cool, like meeting another senior engineer in tech. But she wasn't super kind. I would ask questions about some technical stuff, some coding stuff. And I thought we would be on the same team. We would be aligned in our, maybe in our backgrounds because we were both women in a male dominated team and industry. But this person in particular, I don't think it's representative of, I think it's just this person's personality, but she kind of ignored me and made me feel like I wasn't that great of an engineer. And this was just one person, but I had been looking up to this person more as a role model, and she ended up just she didn't take that opportunity up to be a role model to me. And she was kind of focused on herself and her own goals. And I don't think she really cared that much about helping other women, newbies like me in tech. So have I met resistance? Yes. It's been in those one-off encounters. But for the most part, from men and women across the board, I have had a lot of support.
Thank you. And I did participate in Girls Who Code and Code with Glossy, and my one of the main instructors was male, so they are inclusive. I think that these programs are more geared towards females and building a sisterhood, partially because, again, you were saying you felt alone when you were with all men. And that's the thing, like men will always be together in the tech industry. It's like teaching women who are not like to fend for themselves, but they're alone and they don't have other women support. So it's like making these connections with the few women. And again, like even though like I can make connections with men, it's just like, you know, it's really easy to relate to a female because we're on like the same emotional level, like we go through the same issues within tech. So I don't really understand why they say it's horrible for the industry. I just think they are all about like promoting females because there are programs for men out there, and it's trying to get more females into STEM.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I did Girls Who Code as well, and I thought it was a super like empowering and uplifting program. And I met a bunch of other cool high school girls my age. So I definitely we're plugging a lot of programs today. Definitely, it's a summer program, so if you want to do that Girls Who Code next summer or Code with Clossy, they're great programs as well. You can apply and see if you get accepted.
Yeah, and that's what those programs are awesome for connecting you to other girls and women with similar interests and helping, like you use the word sisterhood. Like that's a really great point. Yeah, I think when they start to go wrong is when they make an enemy of something. It's more like we're in this together, and there are people out there who will support you. That's what I think programs like Girls Who Code are really great for.
Thank you. And so sorry about the little beep. Rachel, and it actually says it is 5:44 a.m. where she is. So thank you, Rachel, for waking
Yeah,
up
wow.
early.
Oh my goodness, Rachel.
She asked, how did you decide on which college to attend?
Yeah. So like I said, I attended the University of Wisconsin in my home state. I'm from Wisconsin. I was born in Muskegon, and I grew up in Wisconsin for most of my life. So when I was applying to colleges, I applied to 5, which might be on the low side. I think a lot of people these days apply to maybe 10 or more. But I didn't apply to many, and it helped me simplify my decision in the end. But one of the schools was obviously Wisconsin-Madison. And then I applied to University of Washington because I had actually lived in the state of Washington for 4 years. And then I moved back to Wisconsin. So there's been some back and forth with where I've lived. But, and then I also applied to Purdue and then a couple schools that were kind of out of my reach, like Stanford in California. And the last one, and then the last one was University of Michigan. So Midwest mainly. In the end, it was between University of Washington for me and Wisconsin. And part of why I chose Wisconsin was first, I got in-state tuition, which is very practical for me. But the other thing was when I was comparing Washington and Wisconsin, I looked into their computer science programs or computer engineering. And I saw that for if I wanted to major in computer science at the University of Washington, I would have to apply to a separate program while I was a student there. And then I would have to wait to hear back. So there was a chance that I would apply and not get into my intended major. Whereas at Wisconsin, if I didn't even have to apply for any program. It's just after you take maybe 2 or 3 computer science courses at Madison, then you can declare your major. There's no application, there's no rejection for that. So the risk was actually lower for me to I knew I wanted to study computer science, and I didn't want to take the risk of moving out of state, paying out of state tuition, only to not get the major that I wanted. So it was kind of like a very calculated decision, but Madison was the most practical college for me.
And then Rachel actually said it's 2:51, but
Oh, nice.
yeah. But our last question, how has COVID impacted your role and working remotely?
Yeah, so COVID, I've been working remotely since March. And when I joined Amazon in August last summer, I was going into the office 5 days a week, and I got to meet my teammates and interact with them, get lunch with coworkers, whatever. So with COVID, yeah, I've had to start working remotely. I do technically live in Seattle right now, but right now I'm in Wisconsin. So I relocated back home for the time being because it was just more practical for me to literally working from home. But it's been different because my team is still in Seattle, so I'm 2 hours ahead of them. So that's been a little weird to like make sure our meetings are not going into like my personal time after work. And how has COVID impacted my role? Well, as a software engineer, I'm fortunate that like all of my work is done on a computer and I can work from anywhere pretty much. So it hasn't really impacted me negatively. At least like I'm still able to perform everything I need to do in my job. The only thing I miss is having those in-person interactions. I haven't met my team. I haven't met my manager in person because I started working on this team in Alexa in May. So it's well into COVID. So it's kind of weird. I see them over video chat sometimes, but I haven't met most of the people I worked with in person, and I wish I will someday, but who knows how long that will be.
And then I know you may have mentioned it before, but our last question is, what's the biggest risk you've taken so far? Two things come to mind. The first is just moving to Seattle to start my full-time job. I risked like moving away from my family in Wisconsin. And there's a risk in that. Maybe it wouldn't work out for me full-time at Amazon. Like maybe I wouldn't be able to keep up with the fast pace. I saw that as a risk. So I was not only moving my entire life out to the West Coast, but then starting at a job that I thought would be really competitive or hard to keep up. Another risk that came to mind is like switching teams. When I switched teams at Amazon, what was I leaving behind for my new team? So I left a team in fulfillment technology for this team in Alexa. I saw it as maybe the Alexa product would be more interesting, but I formed these great connections with my previous team. I had good relationships there. And so I was leaving that behind. And there's been some trade-offs between switching teams, but ultimately I'm glad I've made both of those decisions, moving out to Seattle, starting to work at Amazon, and then switching teams.
Thanks for answering that question. I think that about wraps it up for Shannon. Thank you so much, Shannon, for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome discussion. Great questions, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Jordana and Sydney, for helping to organize this, and thank you guys for attending. And also my last slide here is actually just my LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, I use it all the time. I think it's a really great tool. So you can just send me a connection request. Probably don't even need this URL. Just search up my name in LinkedIn and you'll find me.
Yeah, great. LinkedIn's super helpful. So definitely feel free to connect with Shannon. Again, thanks so much, everyone. We'll be seeing you hopefully at our next session at 2:10 with Nora.